Well, welcome to Watercolor Studio 42, and today I'm going to kind of drop back a little bit. A week or so ago, I started a picture that was a waterfall. I think it was something to do with probably Yosemite National Park in California, and I brought it home, and like I've talked about before, sometimes when you look at the picture the next day in the morning after it's really thoroughly had time to dry out, it lightens up quite a bit. And you can see the one that I've started working on here, the white is aerated water going over the falls. And so when I looked at it the next day, I said, what I need to do is make certain things a little bit clearer. Sometimes you use the brush, you know, you're kind of trying to soften an area out. Not, a lot of times I use the brush like a sponge. So I wet the brush and I'm scrubbing on the paper a little bit, and then I blot it and I lighten it up quite a bit. But now I've got to come back in here and work a little bit more. There's supposed to be all boulders and textures in through this area here. There's some boulders in the foreground here that need to be contrasted a little bit more. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time touching this up, and sometimes you can learn a little bit from what I haven't done, or how I look at it the next morning, if you know. So we'll see what we can do. All right, so I'm going to wet this just a little bit. Just put some water in there. I don't want to wet it too much. Just the areas that I'm going to probably be working on to contrast here. Okay. I didn't put the tape back around the edges yet, but I'll try to not to mess up my false mat that I put around my pictures a lot of time with tape. Here we go. We just wet it a little bit, and I'm just going to come back in here and take a little bit of my sepia and add a little bit of raw sienna into that, and we'll see if I can get some of that texture that I had in the rocks right up in this area here. We want to go a little bit darker up in this part, and even coming down a little bit near the edge of the falls like this. And the rocks have a lot of texture in them, and that's one thing I didn't put back in because the paper was still wet, and I knew that I wasn't going to get some clean-cut lines that way. So I'm just contrasting a little darker. You can even go a little deeper there. I'm using some Payne's Gray. A lot of people rely a lot on Payne's Gray, but I tend to stay away from getting too much of that. But then again, you know, it doesn't hurt to go a little deeper sometimes by mixing Payne's Gray in with another color, just to get that particular color darker sooner. So I'm just working a little bit around, bumping that up a bit. And let's put a little bit more of that Payne's Gray in there. Okay, just to make it contrast. Now, where I need a contrast also is right in this area here. This is supposed to be in the foreground, and this rock here needs to be a little bit darker. So I'm just going to use some of that Payne's Gray and just make this rock jump out a little bit more in the corner. We talked about one time starting a painting and maybe getting halfway through and then continuing on the following week. But you know, a lot of times, anyways for me, that's kind of difficult to pick up where I left off. Like this type of thing, I'm just touching it up a bit, just bringing out some contrast. But to continue on sometimes on a painting, for me, I find it a little bit more difficult to get kind of too excited about into it, you know. I'd rather be starting over again. Sometimes if you work on a picture, you can spend too much time trying to, adjust it, then it would be easier just to start over again. That wasn't a light area in the photograph. That's another thing too. I had the picture, but if you try to look for something, you never find it. And then the next day, when you're not looking for it, it pops up somewhere. But I kind of just remember, this is one of my favorite waterfalls anyway, so I've done the painting quite a few times. Not exactly from the same distance, maybe sometimes I've been a little bit just closer to the waterfall itself and not have so much showing on the sides. But this one here is a little bit back away from it. Let me just put a little bit more darker in here. I'm using my big brush, a flat brush. It's a 1-inch brush. But it doesn't matter, I'm using just the edge of it, not the flat. You can use a flat if you want, just to pull something down. But that's all I'm doing now, is just kind of building up a little bit more contrast in here. A little bit more texture, probably. I can go into here a little bit, but what I sometimes do is erase that so it looks like the spray coming up from the waterfall. This in here looks a little bit fuzzy, so we can do a little bit more of contrast there. I put an edge there and then just pull it back. Okay, a little bit more in here, texture. A little bit, could be more boulders and rocks in there and so forth. But you have to just go over it. I put some markings in there just to remind myself what needs to be kind of developed a little bit more. If I want some trees to show up, I'm just going to cut into this a little bit more into here and show more, like bring out more of the contrast of a tree, fir tree. Right into here. This gets a little bit fuzzy up here. Maybe we can kind of clean that edge up there a little bit more too. Pull it back down. So see, I'm trying to give this thing a little bit more contrast. A little bit more. Bring it out. Now, sometimes you get to a point where you have to take and pull something out. You have to kind of use your brush like an eraser here. There we go. Pull that back a little bit in here. Kind of create a little bit more texture. You can have your picture kind of, as you go towards the edges, go out a little bit out of focus. I do that quite often. Might do that today when I'm working on this other picture. But you don't have to keep everything too sharp, You don't give everything the same amount of attention. You have certain things that you put in more suggestive, because you don't want the person viewing your artwork to not be able to go to a particular area in your painting. You don't want everything to be too busy and getting the same amount of attention. I don't see, that's kind of giving you more, we want to give it more attention to the waterfall, not so much to the background. Now I can still go use a marker or a pen to go back into this to touch it up a little bit more, kind of clean up some of the sharper edges, whatever. But See, I'm trying to give more attention into here. This looks kind of fuzzy in here too. We could probably kind of break that up a little bit more. Make it a little darker there. I want to show some of the foam coming up, you know, the spray, if you will, coming up from the water. So you soften the edges out, take some of the edges away. That brings that up. Probably a little bit more down in here, across here. Pull that back. You kind of get the idea. Sometimes, like I said, you get to a particular point and you're trying to doctor something up, and if it doesn't come out the way you like it, you're probably better off just to write that particular picture off for practice and then start over again. It's a lot easier sometimes than to try to make it a lot of adjustments to what you've done. Okay, I don't want to spend too much time on that, but this is something that you can work on. And when that dries later on, I can sharpen it up. I usually take a marker or something and go back into it. That's more or less, lately that's become more my style of like stained glass window type framing, outlining things more with a marker. You have to sometimes adjust to a little bit to your style. You'll probably notice if all those famous artists in history, how if you've ever picked up a book of some of these artists, you notice that over a period of time how the styles change a little bit. And maybe even the medium that they use, maybe if they painted a lot of oils, they go to watercolors for a while, or they go to pastels and things like that. Sometimes they use a little bit of everything in there. So that just gives you an idea. What I wanted to emphasize is pull the waterfall out a little bit. And if that looks a little bit too white, what I do is take sometimes a little bit of my my blue and just give it a soft little wash, pull up in through the fall, and kind of give it a little bit more shading in there. Softens it out a little bit more, gives it more of the emphasis, the texture of water, rather than just a solid piece of paper. Even along the edges, I sometimes will outline it a little bit more. Something like that. They always tell us for some reason, instead of going with the brush strokes falling, like the water does, they say push up into that with the brush, from the bottom up into the top. Okay? So we spent a little bit of time on that. Again, I'm going to let it dry out, and what I'll do is just go into it just with a fine pen and give it a little bit more texture. Give it more of a jagged texture of rocks, that type of thing. Okay, so we'll put that back over here. We'll put this over here on the board here, on the easel. Okay, now today I'm going to start on, I'm into waterfalls lately, and so this one's a man-made a small fall that's coming through a park, so it cuts over through here. So I don't spend a lot of time with the pencil. Now, in the photograph, the trees, this tree in the foreground is going out of the painting, And what I try to do is bring it back in so that we're trying to confine ourselves to a particular area. There's a little figure of a person down here on the path. Maybe I might put a little bit of a figure back there a little bit later. We'll see how much time we have. Okay, so I'm going to start on this now. What we want to do, just to be on the safe side, I always start with a pencil first and do a little bit of a soft sketch. The angle of the water here is coming in, and right back in this area, we'll see, this is the center of your paper here, approximately, goes this way. So actually we've got more ground than we have sky. You see a little bit of a wedge of sky up and through there, but this is predominantly more of a ground picture here. And there's a little bit of a man-made wall, rocks, comes across in there. It's sort of like a little wedge, it's like a little triangle in here. And then this is where the water actually goes over the edge here, comes down this way, and goes off in through here. Then we've got a few trees. Now you can have a tree kind of bending, you can bring it out a little bit, and but when you get too near the edge, you don't want anything to be pointing off the edge of your paper. So I tend to bring a tree that's over here a little bit inside the edge. Okay? I'm allowing a little bit of the openness. I didn't put the tape on today, so I can go, I put some soft pencil marks just to remind myself, maybe to leave some white around the edge of the paper. A lot of times I do that, but let's see. Around here, that looks dark in there for some reason. It's supposed to be water going over the edge, but it almost looks like it's brownish color. I don't think, I'll probably leave it a little bit lighter than that. And then it flows out this way, like that. Goes back kind of somewhat into this area. Then you've got some trees coming back in here. You've got some sky kind of showing through up around this area, up around the top. And then you got like a little bit of a green strip down in this corner. Over in this corner there's some green. And then mostly there's like a path that goes back that way. I don't go off the paper, but what I might go is just around the corner, bring it out like that. So that's about all the kind of sketching I do. Now, if you want, you can take a marker. If you want, you can do a little bit of that. I'm just going to do it mostly to show it up to the TV audience here. I'll just give it a little bit more of a contrast here. This is where it cuts in there. And this is going to be all the green strip that's down on the edge of the water. This is where the water kind of runs off in this direction. And here's the waterfall. Now that edge is man-made, so it's pretty straight across there. Goes down this far. And you got another green patch over in there in this corner. You don't have to make it exactly the same size. And instead of the tree going out of the painting, I'm going to have it coming into the painting like this, kind of going this way. And then you've got, in the background, you've got to have some irregular trees into here. You can make this any season of the year you want. There's another tree like this, looks like a little V shape. Comes up in there. Another one further back in there. See, the further up you start the base of the tree, the more it creates the depth of your painting. Something coming into here, and something else going up into there. Okay, so now normally what I do is put the blue in. I'll put in a little bit of the sky kind of break it up into here. Then you're going to show a little bit of the reflection of the sky on the water down in here. It's kind of lighter shades, sort of a bluish gray, really. So I want to make sure, excuse me, I'm starting off a little bit clear. I just wet the paper with where the sky's going to be. Just wet it a little bit. Don't form any puddles. Just sweep it over into here. And then I'm going to take a little bit of my blue, just a little bit on the brush. You don't have to make it too dark. Just kind of work that into this area here. Got some trees in there, so you don't have to spend a lot of time on that. Okay, there you go. Now that blue is a lot brighter than the picture that I'm painting on the paper here. Now, I don't spend, like I said, I keep repeating myself like a broken record here, but I don't spend a lot of time on even painting in the sky, nor do I spend a lot of time on the sketch. Especially on landscape paintings, seascapes. It's kind of more of a looser type of texture, you know? The sky, clouds and stuff like that, whatever you put in. Kind of loose. Okay, I'm just going to pinch the brush out, pick up some of those spots in there. I think we're pretty well all set. Now the water's going to be right in through here, in this area. Now, when I do a picture a lot of times, I might have a pencil mark, but I don't always go into that too much. I don't follow too much the pencil marks. The water's going to come breaking down through here. Just chop that up a little bit. And then you got a little bit of the bank of the water here. And it goes off towards the edge of your paper. I'm going to leave a little bit of white margin around that today. Broken margin. Okay, you got something like this. Pull that back out. It's going to be a little bit darker, right in the shadows are going to be in here mostly. Okay, so you get some of these interesting shapes in. Now, if I want this to be more of a fall picture, where are we with that? Oh, I'm hiding my tissues here. Okay, if you want it to be more of a fall picture, I usually start off with a little bit of the yellows, and I'm just dashing some color into that. Down in here, you see right through here, some of the lower areas, there's quite a bit of yellow in this spot here. Yellowish green. Yeah, just kind of wiggle up and through here. You can go push it up into this cloud area. Because what's happening there is that the yellow gets in you get more greenish color. And the colors mix like that. Let's put a little bit more up in here. I can use a little bit of that Payne's Gray too that I have. Put some shadow in it. Now, a lot of times I stick with a larger brush for as long as I can. Sometimes maybe too long. You never know what's going to happen here, huh? But the big thing is to get some paint on the paper. Somebody said to me the scariest part is when you look at a white piece of paper, what am I going to do with this thing? Not really. Get some color into it. I think sometimes I take off and I kind of jump ahead of what I'm doing, and then I look back, wait a minute. I fill that in, and it's supposed to be something else there. But it's usually, I'm using the photographs all the time, kind of giving me a little bit of a boost, a little bit of a reference to what's happening out there. This time of year is nice to paint, even if you have some trees around your property in the backyard. You can go out and sit on the deck and look out over the railing of your deck and paint what's out there. And if you want to change anything, leave something out, put something in, like a bird bath or whatever might be out there, you can do that. Kind of where it's a little bit yellow, I'm kind of dashing more of that yellow into that. Let's hit this corner over here. Put some yellow into that. These are mostly base colors. We're putting in down here. And I try to keep it loose. I don't want to get too fussy with anything at this particular stage. Just drop some color. And if you want to come back in a little bit later and get fussy with something, you can do that. Always keep in mind, you might want to always have in mind where the focal point might be. I'm thinking in this picture it's off in there somewhere, where the man-made waterfall is here. We'll probably give that a little bit more attention. And then there's kind of the path that meanders up in there somewhere like that. Let's do this corner over here. We'll get some color over here. See, the more you paint, the more you kind of loosen up. Sometimes it's better. And what forces you to loosen up a lot of times is using a larger brush to begin with. If you start with a little thin brush, my gosh, you'd be forever trying to get some color into your artwork. So don't worry about that. Okay, now, if I want to get a little bit more greener color, I take what I have for the yellow there, put a little bit more of that blue into it. That blue I'm using is phthalo blue, which is like a cerulean type of blue. There, get some green back in here. Quite a bit of darker green over in this corner. Okay, see how the colors mix on the paper, which is okay. I'm going to just pull some of this back out. Kind of take some of the edges away. Do a little bit of that. Okay. Let's see where we're at. Now what I want to do, before I go too crazy with getting too much green and blue here, what I want to do here is go back in and get some of that ground in there. I save the trees usually for the finale because they're almost like silhouettes. They're very dark color. I should probably use Payne's Gray for those trees and things. Now, let's see if I can get some of that, maybe I can use some of that raw sienna. See if I can put some of that in there. We'll put some ground into, oh boy, too much yellow. Let's see if I can find something we can do differently here. Let's take a little bit of, take some of that sepia and put that into it so I get a little darker shade of brown, like the ground color. That's not too bad. Too much water in there. Kind of pull that out into here a little bit more, cut that out. You can break that up a little bit more too. Usually there's some shadows of the trees in here that help that area. Yeah, get some more of that color in here, pull that across. And right into here more. And there's some, looks like it goes off this way. Excuse me. Here we go. Something like that. Okay, move that in. Now, is there any more of that somewhere? I suppose I could drop a little bit of that on this shade here. Get some of that in there. Let's add a little bit more of that. Sepia. I want to start getting that a little bit darker over in this area. Notice sometimes I go flat with the brush. Let's get this a little bit darker in the corner, the way it is in the photograph. Show a little bit of that. And just go over here a little bit more. Make this darker coming out of this corner. It's really dark in the picture. Right over in here. Put some of that in there. Notice I wiggle the brush around, kind of turn it flat sometimes and then thin. Okay, get some of that in there. Now, the thing is that if you work with a larger brush, you can't get too picky with anything. These are just more of quite a bit flatter shapes. Okay. And if we get a little bit more, I'm going to put a little bit more blue into this too, along with the sepia. Get some of that blue into this area. I don't know if it's showing up enough or not. And it gets darker in here. That blue isn't showing up too well, so get a little bit more blue in the brush here. I like to see, kind of variation of color working. Put a little bit of that back up in here. Kind of break that up a little bit more. It's going to be maybe some grass in there. Okay. I think I can go to a smaller brush to get some of the other effects I'm looking for. Go down here a bit. Fill this in a little bit more down here on the edge. I like to repeat my colors, somewhere else. I put some of that back up in there. Right through here. Pull that down a little bit towards the water. The edge, right? Yep. I'm looking up in here right now. You put that down there. And I got quite a bit of green, yellow in the green there. But let's see what else. Well, we could start doing a little bit. We could start getting a little darker up in here, in the tree area. I'll leave some room for the change of color here. If I want to make an autumn scene, if I get too much green, it's awful hard to get some of that change of color back in there. And come down to there a bit. Let's see a little bit over in here. Gotta jump around. I usually point at the brush sometimes. One corner of the brush. Go up and through here. A little bit, break this up. Get some more things happening up in there. Okay. All right. Now, so far, I'm putting a little bit more life into the painting with my colors. The pictures, photographs, tend to be a lot of times dark. You got that backlighting, and it makes everything in the foreground too much like a silhouette. Doesn't have much color. Look, I don't know what I didn't get enough paint on the brush to do anything with that. Bring this down in here a little bit more. Right through there. Maybe bring that across over into here. Fill that in. All right. How about a little bit, just to emphasize, there's a little bit of a cut there, zigzags, and fill some of that in. You can bring that out into there. Something like that. Okay. Now you can see by using a big brush, I'm not able to get too fussy. I'm not picky, right? I'm trying not to be anyways. I don't know if I should do too much more into there. I don't know. Gotta break it up a little bit. Okay, that's not doing much, is it? I didn't do too much to that. I don't know, a little bit more up into here. Possibly around into there. Okay. This can be darker. Sometimes what happens is that I either get too dark or maybe it's too light. But usually you're safer if you go lighter, and then if you want to go darker a little bit later, you can do that. Let's just cut into here. See some ground in there. Put some shadow in that. What else? Maybe back up in here. I know, the underbrush and down, a little bit more sepia into that. And I don't know, maybe take a little bit of raw sienna. I don't know how that's going to work across there, but we just put some in. Okay. Get too much paint on the brush maybe. Sometimes I take some of the water and the paint out of the brush and just kind of pull some of this back. What you don't want to do is sometimes you get stuck in a rut, and when your brush strokes start working, everything goes one way. It looks like a windstorm pushing everything across your paper. So you have to be careful. Don't keep going the same way, but change direction. Go, move the brush around like that. Wiggle the brush around when you paint, so you're not doing the same thing all the time. Okay, now, okay. I'm going to let some of that kind of dry out a little bit before I start going into it too much. I can start changing a little bit some of the color, adding some of the fall colors in there. I'm going to be extra cautious with my orange here, and I'm going to put a little bit over in one of these wells, And just put a little dab of some of that raw sienna, and just start tapping around in the and stippling with a brush. I'm using a round brush now, probably a number, whatever, 14, I guess. Okay, we'll just dabble around in here. Sometimes I use Q-tips. You can do a picture without even using a paintbrush. Sometimes just use little Q-tips, little dots, you know. So here we're jumping all over the place. We can go down into here, put some color into there, go up into here. And then we want to do some more up into there. Get some more paint on the paper here. Okay, now another thing you might notice, this particular picture that I'm working with is predominantly supposed to be elongated, and here I am stretching it out a little bit flatter. You can do that. Some people prefer the paintings to be more of a horizontal than vertical. I don't know if there's a big difference about it, but certain things look better one way or the other. Notice I'm getting a little bit more orange in here. And big thing is distribution of kind of carry it around. I call it echoing the color, you know, yellow, 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 yellow. One of those things. This started to get like a water stain in there. Sometimes I leave it in or paint into it and break it up. Make it look more like pebbles or something. Okay, I'm using a little bit of yellow with my orange, so the orange doesn't get too dark. Dabble around a little bit. Okay. Now I could spend a lot more time dabbling here. I call it dabbling when I tap around. Dabble, dabble. Okay. Now, of course, the finale is when I put the trunks of trees in, and probably the narrow trees, I'll just use a thin brush, and then for some of the other trees, I can use a wider flat brush and just kind of churn it a little bit. Now this particular photograph doesn't have too much pink or red in it. That's up to you if you want to put more color to it. But I want to leave some time for the trunks of the trees. Get some of those in. You could add a little bit of that, carry it over into here, you know, whatever. You want to get some of that distribution of color. Could be leaves on the ground or whatever. Okay, so there you go. Now, what happens a lot of times is that I don't let certain areas dry longer, so that's sometimes your colors will kind of fade in, and you have to touch it up a little bit if you want to bring out color a little darker. I can go a little darker in this spot. You get some little bit texture over here. Now, sometimes you're better off to do a lot less than what you see in the photograph. Sometimes a photograph shows every little fine, little fussy detail, but sometimes the artist kind of simplifies it a little bit more and leaves out some, leaves a little bit more to the imagination. I'm going to get a little contrast in here. And while I'm thinking about it, I'm just going to go back in and take a little bit more, get some of that blue out of the brush here. But I'm going to just hit some of the edges here where the blue might show up a little bit darker in places, especially on the edge. If I got enough blue in there, I'm being kind of stingy with my blue here. Yeah, just get a little bit more texture in here. Just along the edge. Now you can get as fussy as you want, but you know, I'm just kind of giving you a hint of what we might consider. Okay. You know what it is with watercolor sometimes? If you get away from watercolors and you haven't painted for a while, you kind of lose a little bit of that spontaneity, you know? And you have a tendency to try to put in too much, overwork it, you know? Don't try to do too much. I'm just going to kind of break that up across here just a little bit. Some shadow in there. Kind of go in the direction of the flow. Okay, something like that. And let's see, that's about it for that. This is supposed to be where the water breaks over there. You know, I'm going to give myself a little bit more time to do some of the trees. I hope this is dry enough through here. You know, take a chance with it. But what we want to do is take some of that darker color, Payne's gray. You can put a little sepia into it, make it a little deeper. And this tree is going to be coming up right up through here. Make it a little bit wider down on the base there. Yeah, something like that. You got something going in there. Now, there's a sort of some V shapes in here. 1, 2, and then this one, I can put this a little wider there. You got something else coming out of here, something over here. You put some of those in. See, get a little bit more paint on the brush. You can use a thinner brush if you want. Let's make this a little bit wider there, wider. Then lift up on the brush. Go up into there, maybe show a little bit coming through there, maybe a little bit over in here. Okay, you can get carried away with that too, put too much in there. Okay, there might be something else that breaks up off over there, like that. Okay, yeah. We're getting kind of a little bit shorter on time. There's always there's little finishing touches. Now what I would do with this is mostly, right now, is just to take a brush and fill in a little bit more. Fill in a little bit more of the, you don't have to show the limbs. You can show a couple of suggestions here and there, but I use a rigger for that, a very thin brush. But you want to fill this in a little bit more. Get some more solid colors into here. That type of thing. Now, that looks a little bit white in there, doesn't it? Let's I'll take a little bit more of that. Where's my... Running out of blue here. What I'm going to do is just fill that in a little bit more. Whoops. It's a little bit dark. But just fill that area in there. I think that's a little bit too heavy, so let's take some of that out of there. Quiet it down. Okay. Want a little bit more contrast across here. Okay, let's see the picture again. Okay, let's kind of fill this in a little bit more. Back up in here. Just wiggle some brush. Wiggle it around in there. Break that up. Break this up in here a little bit more. Maybe a little bit more back here. And, you know, the finishing touches, you might want to put some more branches in there. Take my rigger, see what we can do. Always a little bit more dabbling around, so to speak. Work on that. Probably clarify a little bit more in here. I'm taking whatever I have left over on some of my palette here, using some of that. Okay. So a little darker off here. All right, it gives you an idea how this thing breaks up. Probably a little bit more texture. You can take some rocks or something, put maybe some pebbles, you know, some little stones in the water there. Just a few, you know, just to break it up a little bit with the texture. But that gives you an idea a little bit how that works. I always dabble around a little bit and finish it off a bit and whatnot. There's always something to do, a little cast shadows. If you want to put some little people figures off in there. Sometimes you put people in the picture, that gives you a better proportion of the size of things. Okay, well, I'm getting towards finishing up time here. Put a couple little shadows across the ground, break that up in there. Okay. There's a few little textures that I've left in, whatever they might be, little twigs and sticks and whatnot. You can take your rigger later on and a little thin brush and add some branches into that. It gives you an idea where we're at. Okay. Now I've kind of brighten up the picture a lot more than the photograph. The photograph, like I said, a lot of times the backlighting puts everything in front, almost like a silhouette, makes everything darker, doesn't bring out any color. So what the artist tries to do is kind of perk it up a little bit more and add a little bit more life to it, more color. Okay, so that's it for this time, folks. So until next time, brushes up, and we'll see you later. Okay, thanks for being with us.